All right, guys. So can we start the session? Am I audible to all of you? Is the voice is loud and clear? Can I just confirm me? Okay, yes, Sharon. Fine. Good evening, Sanjay. Okay, so guys, we'll start. Any questions from the previous session? Yeah, just 1 minute, guys. Let me pause this recording. Just 1 minute. All right. Okay. So can we now start with today's session? Right. Okay. So here we will try to understand key concepts and some of the case studies we will discuss, and I'll bring up the perspectives also. So that's what actually we are planning. And we will begin by understanding what culture is and its significance in anthropology we will see. See, what is culture? It is actually defined as a set of knowledge, right? When we talk about culture, certain set of knowledge which is passed from one generation to other. It include beliefs, it include arts, it include morals, it includes certain laws, norms, values, customs, which are acquired by members as members of society. Now, why a individual acquire this as a member of society? So it is actually passed from one generation to the other. So these beliefs and these norms and the values and the moralities and everything passed from one generation to the other. And this is actually the definition which is given by Taylor, Edward B. Taylor, a British anthropologist. So the study of culture actually forms the basis of anthropology. And that's what we are going to focus in the coming session also. And this is a scientific study of human societies and culture. Okay, so in anthropology, when we see culture is seen as a learned behavior passed from generation to generation, and it is what distinguishes us from humans from other species. So you remember yesterday when we discussed, I told you we are social animal with culture and we can speak. Okay, linguistic capability is also there. So a technical definition or a pure anthropological definition, if I want to give you, culture is seen as a learned behavior we acquired over a period of time from a previous generation, which means passed from generation to generation, and we acquired it from the past generation, we will transmit to the next generation, and this is what actually distinguishes the humans from the other species. Okay, so let's start more discussing on this, the definition. Okay, so here in the field of anthropology, numerous scholars have attempted to define culture. Notably, if you see Alfred Kroeber and Kluckhohn, so they compile more than 200 definitions of culture in their work. And these definitions basically highlight the diverse perspectives on what constitutes culture. So, see, there's a social science ultimately, and different people have difference of opinion, and different scholars have defined culture in different ways using their opinion and perspective and their understanding about it. Okay, so that's what actually this compilation is all about. And this gives diverse perspective. And Kroeber and Kluckhohn emphasize that culture is both tangible and intangible. It includes both material elements like tools and non-material elements like beliefs and values. So it includes the material aspect, it includes the non-material aspects like beliefs and values. That's more prominent. So they basically emphasize the multifaceted nature of culture, and it could be tangible, intangible, means material and non-material. And they basically compiled around 200 definitions, and that's how they made that understanding. So now comes to the critical view of concepts and definitions. If you see, in this book, they provided definitions from a range of scholars. That's what I have told you, that around 200 definitions were given. And a not reviewer, Geets, okay, Clifford Geets, criticized the multiplicity of definitions. So which one you will rely upon? That's actually the criticism here. So saying that culture could be viewed as a text, right? Meaning, like much like a piece of writing, it can be interpreted in various ways. So there is no single definition encompasses everything about culture, and this reflects the complexity and depth of the concept. So see, guys, when we discuss about culture, some can define that in terms of language, some define in terms of religion, some define in terms of certain practices, some define in terms of certain rules or norms or the values or the beliefs, etc. So it varies and it is different. So that's why, as a concept, culture is a deep concept actually. So there are a lot of complexities involved. That is one of the criticism. So that's what it can be interpreted in multiple ways, and no single definition actually fit into this. So that's how the criticism of this definition. Now coming to the key features. See, there are several key features that define culture. So first, culture is learned. That means what? No one is born knowing their culture. It is acquired through socialization. Very clear, right? See, we are born in a society, and when we are born, we are not coming with a culture. We are taught, we have seen certain things, and we follow that. Over a period of time, it become habituated, certain beliefs, certain practices. We automatically do because our society do, our family do, right? That means it is learned. That's the first point. And then it is shared. So it's not just about individual, but it is collective, right? You see, entire society is following the same culture, or entire group or community is following the same culture, which means it's not about individual, it is actually shared, and it is symbolic, right? So symbols like language or religious icon represent deeper meanings. It is symbolic also, it reflect identity also. And culture is dynamic, right? And constantly evolving. uh, Previous generation to this generation to next generation, there is a cultural shift which is happening. Modernization also which is happening in culture, cultural modernization is also there, right? So it is integrated. While being integrated, it is constantly evolving. There are elements from the past which is continued but still evolving and keep on changing. So which means different aspect of culture such as religion, economy, politics, all are interconnected, all are integrated, all are evolving, and that's how it is going, right? So this is what actually I'm talking about in this slide. So it's acquired through socialization. That means it is learned and it is shared. It is not individual element, or it is symbolic, represent deeper cultural meanings, right? And constantly evolve with you know time. Okay, so now culture as an integrated system. So we can think of culture as a system. Guys, as it is a revision session, I'm making it slightly faster. So here, culture as a system, how can you think about that? Just as your phone, what's a system with various components, like you have a screen, you have a battery, you have a software within that. Culture is also composed of interconnected parts. What are the interconnected parts in this? Norms, values, beliefs, traditions, the customs, practices, all which you follow. So this means that a change in one part of the culture will affect the other parts. For example, changes in economic system, such as industrialization, can lead to changes in family structures and values. So traditionally, joint family may move to a nuclear family, which will affect not only the family values and the norms and practices and the beliefs, but also it can have a wider impact on society and thereby the entire culture of that society. So that's what I want to see this as a system, and this is how it is integrated, right? So interconnected components. Culture is a system which is connected with parts. Changes in one part will impact the whole, and economic changes can alter the family structure and the entire society also. I'll give you one case study. See, I'll give you an example from Malayar. Malayar is a region where religious beliefs have a direct impact on the agricultural system. And in Malayar, it is basically believed that plowing the soil is equivalent to, tearing the chest of Mother's Earth. As a result, what farmers do, they avoid plowing. While, when they avoid plowing, it directly affects their crop yields, right? So here is how a religion, an aspect of culture, affect economic system. So when you believe that it is like tearing the chest of, Mother Earth, then they are not doing it. It is definitely affecting their economic system. So certain beliefs can affect the entire system. Okay, so such interdependence is what we mean by culture as an integrated whole. I hope you got this example. They won't do because of that. So The belief that plowing tears Mother Earth affect the crop yields. But still, they follow that belief and they won't do that. So religion directly impact the economic system in Malaya. And there's a very much clear example of culture as an integrated whole. Okay, so now moving on to the next one, potluck ceremony. Another one. See, there's another example of how culture function as a system in potluck ceremony of the Kukuiti tribe. So it's studied by Franz Boas, and the potluck is a form of competitive gift giving where the wealthier members of the tribe give away or destroy their possessions to demonstrate generosity. So wealthier members of the tribe community, what they do, they will give away or they will destroy their possessions. Either they will give it or they'll destroy to demonstrate generosity. So in return, they gain what? They gain social status. So they show that their generosity and they get the social status. So this tradition basically shows the interplay between economy. What is economic angle here? Gift giving. You are giving it away, right? And the politics, what is the political element here? They are getting social status. So what is the economic element? You are giving. What is the social status? That is a political element. So economic element is there, political element is there. And what is the belief system here? The ritual importance of the ceremony. So all the three are interconnected. You got my point. So potluck ceremony, when the tribe, the wealthier members, when they give away or destroy the possession, showing the generosity. So when I say give away, gift giving us economic side. And when they get back the social status because of that, that's a political angle. And what is the belief system here? The ritual importance of that particular ceremony. So all these are interconnected. Okay, so the tribe. So interplay between economic, politics. I hope this is very clear how this interplay. Economy means when you give away the gift, that is economic element. Political element means when you get the social status, and the belief system is about the importance of that particular ceremony. So, 1 minute, guys. Okay, now comes to this culture as a pattern. Tribal example. Okay. See, again, when we discuss about culture, it's not just about random, but follow certain pattern. And different societies have unique cultural patterns. See, you can see different societies have different traditions, different beliefs, different practices, different norms and values, right? And altogether a different pattern. Okay, altogether is what culture means. And in different societies, it varies, means different societies have different patterns you can see in terms of culture. For instance, if you see, Mamo tribe, it was studied by Napoleon Chagnon. So has a violent pattern of behavior. And among them, killing enemies is a symbol of masculinity. Okay, and those who have killed more than one person are considered real man. Okay, so killing enemy is the sign of masculinity. And if you want to be considered as a real man, you need to kill two. Okay, those who killed more than two, at least two. Okay, so on the other hand, some other tribes like Zunil Indians, they follow peaceful pattern of culture. And these differences reflect in the distinct ways in which societies structure their values and practices. So what I want to tell you is that different societies follow different pattern, and thereby the culture is different. Their beliefs and value systems are different. So two tribes have given the example. One consider violence as symbol of masculinity, and they want to kill at least two to be considered as a real men. But on the other hand, another tribe consider peaceful patterns of culture. So, which means the variations in culture in terms of patterns. So this is a one violent behavior pattern, killing enemies as masculinity symbol, and Zunil Indian follow peaceful cultural pattern and practices. So this reflect distinct ways society structure values and practices. Ruth Benedict patterns of culture. Right. Okay. So American anthropologist Ruth Benedict actually categorized culture into two broad types. What are they? Apollonian and Dionysian. Okay, so Apollonian culture, like the Sunil Indian, are peaceful and value moderation. In contrast, Dionysian culture, like Quaquity, are comparative and very aggressive and ritualistic. So these are again two broad types, and these patterns of culture reflect the underlying values of each society. So understanding them basically helps the anthropologist make sense of the diversity of human behaviors. Guys, don't mind about the pronunciation. It may not be exactly correct or the way you do. So just understand the concept here. So on one side, you're talking about Apollonian culture, and on the other side, you're talking about Dionysian culture. Okay, and both are different, distinct. On one side, you're talking about competitive, aggressive, and on the other side, you're talking about peaceful and value moderate culture. So there are difference again in the pattern. So see here, Apollonian cultures, they're talking about peaceful value moderation like Zuni Indians. And then Dionysian culture, the competitive, aggressive, ritualistic culture. And patterns reflect core values of each society. So what's the anthropological insights, if you ask me? Understanding these patterns will basically help you to make sense of this diversity. Now, cultural relativism, the core concept we discussed in the previous session also. So let's continue with that. See, one of the most important concept in anthropology is cultural relativism. It's a term which is actually popularized by Franz Boas, and it refers to the idea that we should understand and evaluate other cultures based on their own norms and values, not your own. See, if I want to study one particular society, I want to understand it in terms of their norms and values. My society now itself, I've told you, two different societies, entirely different. One society consider killing others as masculinity feature, other society look for peaceful nature. So if I am from like a the society where killing is considered as the sign of masculinity, and if I am trying to judge the other community where they consider peaceful living and cooperation as a typical feature, then it is not going to be correct. I cannot understand other society within my shoes. If I want to understand other society, I need to go to their shoes and then see things from their perspective, which means the values are guiding them, the norms which are guiding them is what I need to understand first, and then I need to study. I cannot study from my norms and values, my traditions, my culture. These are totally different. Okay, so that's what cultural relativism. So basically, this means avoiding ethnocentric judgment. Ethnocentrism means considering my culture as superior. So that should not be there. So when it comes to ethnocentrism, we view other cultures are inferior or wrong just because they are different from yours. So for anthropologists, cultural relativism is essential for conducting objective and unbiased research. We discussed this already, right? So this will help avoiding ethnocentrism, and it help in objective research, and it's popularized by Bose. Coming to the next slide, ethnocentrism, we discussed judging others' culture by your own standards, by thinking that others are inferior to you and you are superior. Cultural relativism is like appreciating each culture's unique logic. That means when you're studying, you study from their shoes, and criticizing others' eating habits or food styles or dressing patterns or housing patterns in comparison to yours. That is example of ethnocentrism. Opposite, you can say egocentrism. Okay, so basically, to better understand the cultural relativism, we can compare it with ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism is when people judge others' culture by the standard of their own culture. You judge others on your standards, your norms, your values, your tradition, your culture, your belief and practices. For example, again, if someone from a predominantly vegetarian society criticizes a society that consume meat, that's ethnocentrism. You got my point, right? Similarly, someone who's eating meat criticizes the only that chances of that is very less. But the opposite is true, right? You are vegetarian and criticizing those who are eating meat. That is what ethnocentrism. So opposite, in contrast, cultural relativism encourages us to appreciate that each culture has its own logic and reason to practice such kind of eating habits, rituals, and the family structures. Okay, so I hope this difference between cultural ritualism, cultural relativism, and ethnocentrism is very clear to all of you. See, guys, cultural relativism in anthropology, when it comes to that, yes, okay. See, again, by using cultural relativism, anthropologists are able to gain deeper and more holistic understanding of societies that they study. For instance, if you see Ruth Benedict work on that tribe which I have discussed, Kwakuti tribe and Sunni tribe, showed how understanding their unique cultural patterns gave insight into their worldview and behaviors. Okay, so see, without the lens of cultural relativism, these insights could be clouded by our own biases and the preconception. So if you are not applying the concept of cultural relativism and seeing things from your view, then you will not get that kind of understanding. You will be completely biased, and your preconceived notions or the preconceptions will be completely affecting and taking the research forward. That won't work out. So cultural relativism is very, very important as a anthropologist in studies. Now, moral relativism versus cultural relativism. Okay. Now coming to this, there is a common misunderstanding between cultural relativism and moral relativism. See, cultural relativism is about understanding practices within their cultural context. But when it comes to moral relativism, it goes further by implying that morals themselves are relative and should not be judged. I repeat, when we talk about cultural relativism, it's about understanding practices within their cultural context. But when it comes to moral relativism, it goes further by implying that morals themselves are relative and should not be judged. It is relative even within the society. It is relative even between the societies. Okay, so I hope this is very clear. Morals are relative within the society, and morals are relative between the societies also. Okay, so this is not what anthropologists advocate. Okay, for example, if you see Clifford Geertz made it very clear that cultural relativism does not excuse human rights violation. It won't excuse human right violations such as genocide or slavery. But there are certain universal values like human dignity that transcend cultural differences. Okay, so that's again, I want to make it very clear that cultural relativism we talk about in no way. There are some standards that we follow across the universe as universal values, right? The human dignity. Okay, so killing cannot be justified in any way. So that's what I want to discuss here. It made it clear that cultural relativism does not excuse the human rights violations. So when I talk about cultural relativism, it's about understanding practices within the cultural context. Moral relativism, morals are relative, should not be judged, and universal values, dignity transcends cultural difference. Now, there are criticisms that also we can discuss. So, critics of cultural relativism, like Clyde Kluckhohn, argue that it can sometimes justify harmful practices. But I have discussed about this in the previous slide, right? So, it can justify harmful practices. And for example, Kluckhohn actually pointed out that if we accept cultural relativism without a question, we might excuse events like the Jewish Holocaust as being part of the Nazi cultural belief system. So are we accepting that? Right. So this is, of course, not acceptable and unacceptable completely. And if you see Elizabeth Gentle, another scholar, similarly criticized cultural relativism, suggesting that it can lead to the abuse of individual rights under the pre-context of cultural practices. So, but this is not anyway tolerated. Okay, so harmful practices, cultural relativism can justify some unacceptable practices like Nazi Holocaust, etc. And relativism can lead to abuse of individual rights also. These are the criticism. Now coming to this slide, Holocaust and cultural relativism, one of the most extreme examples used to criticize cultural relativism is the Jewish Holocaust during World War II. So the Nazis believed that their actions were justified as part of their cultural ideology of racial superiority. So they believe that it is justified, okay, because of the ideology that practiced that the racial superiority. But cultural relativism asks us to understand others' culture in terms of their own beliefs, right? So it does not mean we must accept atrocities as being culturally legitimate. In this case, it is very clear that it is, it is illegitimate actually, right? Whether it is in terms of culture or what, it is like, cruel atrocity. So we cannot accept that kind of atrocity just in terms of, culturally legitimate. Okay, so this is where anthropologists draw the line that human right violations must always be condemned. So you study cultural relativism, understand things in terms of that, but wherever human right violation comes, that's the line. It should not close. That is not accepted. So here, is it accepted? No. Okay. So now I hope that point is clear again. Coming to the adaptive and maladaptive cultural practices. Guys, see, many cultural practices are adaptive, meaning they help a society to survive in its environment. Okay, some can be maladaptive over a period of time. Now, if you see, an adaptive practice is one that ensures the survival of a group. It helps in the functioning of the group or the system, and it helps in the survival, such as, agricultural techniques that suit a particular environment. That is what I mean by adaptive cultural practice. But when a cultural practice hinders the survival, it becomes maladaptive. For example, Johar in Rajasthan, where women were burned to avoid capture or reduce the population and hindered the group's long-term survival. So that's maladaptive example. So Johar in Rajasthan, women burned to avoid capture, reducing population. We discussed this? Yes, okay, perfect. Again, female infanticide. Female infanticide is another example of maladaptive practice. So, you see, in some cultures, female infants were killed to control population size. For instance, uh, Tapiri, Tapiri Indians of Brazil practice female infanticide for population control. But, as their population dwindled, continuing this practice became a threat to their survival. So, what was once an adaptive practice became maladaptive over a period of time. And it threatened the group's further future existence also. So adaptive can become maladaptive in future. Okay, so now moving on to the next slide. Kaiko ritual. Okay, so see, in contrast to what we discussed, some cultural practices are adaptive and help societies to adjust to their environment. A famous example is the Kaiko ritual of the Sambia tribe of New Guinea, which was studied by Roy Rappaport. Very significant study. And in this ritual, pigs are slaughtered in a mass ceremony over 10 to 12 years. And this actually helped the community to manage the pig population, which, if left unchecked, would consume too many resources and threaten the agricultural stability. So it is practiced to ensure the agricultural stability. Okay, so the ritual also strengthens the social bonds and redistributes resources, making it as an essential adaptive practice for the Sambia people. So how it become an essential adaptive practice? It firstly help in the agricultural stability by controlling the pig population, and at the same time it enhances social bonds and redistribute the resources also because of that ceremony. Okay, so this ritual. Now, another example of adaptive practice. This we have discussed already. Yes, this is what was told. So, tribe of New Guinea studied by Roy Rappaport. Mass slaughter of pigs every 10 to 12 years. So, manage the pig population and strengthen the social bond. Yes, okay. Now, the culture and adaptation to environment. See, guys, cultures evolve and adapt to their physical environment, always, right? So you live in an environment and everyone belong to that society, live in the same environment. So over a period of time, certain rituals and practices will come and that forms a culture. For example, in this case, forest dwelling people like Jarawa tribes in Andaman Islands. If you see, they practice hunting and gathering because the rich resource in their forest environment allowed them to sustain their community without agriculture. So they can go for hunting and gathering and it actually helped them. No issue with that. Similarly, the Inuit of the Arctic have developed unique clothing and hunting practices and housing to adapt to their harsh environment. So it again, you evolve over a period of time in connection to your environment. So these examples show that cultural practices are often deeply rooted in environment and ecological conditions and the society in which you live, right? So that's what I want to discuss from this. So Jarawas of Andaman, Inuit of Arctic. So it completely depends on the environment. Now, how culture shapes human personality. See, again, another important function of culture is fulfilling the basic human needs of food, shelter, safety, and social relationship. So the most important function of culture is to fulfill the human needs like food, what food they eat, the kind of housing pattern, right, and the relationship between the people. And according to Malinowski, culture is a need fulfilling mechanism. That's a simple definition. So what are essential needs? Housing or shelter, safety, social relationship. So what is culture? According to Malinowski, it's a need fulfilling mechanism. For example, in a study in Trobriand Islands, very, very important study, guys, Trobriand Islands, Malinowski observed that a social organization of the community helped to regulate the food production and distribution, and that ensures that everyone's needs were met. Okay, so this basically demonstrates that culture is not just about rituals and beliefs. It also a practical system that helps societies to survive and thrive. You got it. So how they managed and how everyone's needs were met, you can see from that clear example, and culture help in that. So I have missed out to discuss that study here, but I'll give you the PDF where that will be covered. Now, let's see how culture shape human personality. Right. Okay. See, culture also plays a very crucial role in shaping human personality, right? So you are born in a society and you are learning a culture, the way you behave, the way you interact with the elders, the language that you talk, the beliefs and practices you follow. Everything is actually guided by the culture. And I'll give you one example in Margaret Mead's study of Samoan adolescents. She found that their culture, which is basically promoted peace and harmony, and that resulted in a smooth transition to adulthood. So when you live in such kind of society, what she's saying is it's a smooth transition to adulthood. But in contrast, Western societies with strict cultural norms often experienced a turbulent adolescence. And this demonstrates that culture influences how individuals perceive and navigate different stages of their life. So the peaceful adolescence of Samoan girls is a direct result of cultural conditioning, according to Mead. Okay, so this is how culture actually help in developing human personality. So peaceful adolescence linked to cultural conditioning. Now, culture impact how individuals navigate in different stages of the life, and it actually contrasts with strict norms of the Western society, which are, where actually have a turbulent adolescence and difficult and tough adolescence. Okay, now comes to next slide, that is transition of cultural knowledge. All right, okay. So culture, again, it's actually transmitted from one generation to the next through both formal and informal education. Formal means like the schooling system and other things, such kind of system. Informal means from family, from friends, and etc. So this process is not static. Culture evolve as new generations, you know, when new generations, when they start interpreting and modify traditions. So I told you culture is always evolving. It is not fixed. So the next generation may make some modification. They interpret it differently. They modify the traditions. They come in interaction with some other culture. So a cultural mixing can happen. That's how culture evolved over a period of time. For example, the Yanomamo tribe of Venezuela transmits the value of fierceness to younger generation, where killing is associated with social status. Previously, also I've discussed almost a similar one. So this transmission occurs through rituals, stories that you hear, and daily practices, and that ensures that cultural values persist across the generation. Okay, so that's how transmission of cultural knowledge will happen. But again, remember it evolved over a period of time. Depends on the new generation when they uh, get to interact more and try to modify more. Now, material and non-material culture. Okay. See, anthropologists differentiate between material culture and non-material culture always. So material culture include the physical objects like tools, architecture, clothing, etc. For example, Mangal Sutra is a symbol of marriage in Hindu culture, which is a material culture. You remember I told you about tangible and non-tangible, same as material and non-material. So Mangal Sutra, that's a symbol of marriage among Hindu culture. So, which is a material culture, it's part of the culture, it's a belief, right? On the other hand, if you see non-material culture include the intangible elements like beliefs, practices, the customs. For instance, the belief in karma, that is significant, when it comes to non-material aspect of Indian culture. You believe in karma, right? That is very significant when it comes to Indian culture. So together, these components help shape to understand the worldview, or it actually help shape the worldview and practices of a society. Okay, so that's about material and non-material. Ethic and emic perspective. Now, coming to ethic and emic perspective, see, in anthropology, we often use the terms ethic and emic to describe different perspectives. So, ethic perspective is the outsider's view, where researchers observe a culture without being influenced by insider knowledge. On the other hand, emic perspective is the insider view, where we seek to understand how members of a culture perceive their own practices. It's an insider view. Okay, so ethic, it's an outsider view. Emic, it's insider view. So we try to understand how members of a culture practice their own practices when it comes to emic view. So for example, Marvin Harris, yes, he used the ethic approach to explain why Indian farmers, venerate cows, viewing it as an adaptive strategy rather than just a religious belief. That's the example. Now let me go back to the cultural relativism and ethnocentrism. We already discussed this in the 3 lectures actually. See, we discussed this earlier, right? Cultural relativism encourages us to understand culture based on their own standards rather than judging them through the lens of your own culture. Okay, so you are not judging others' culture in your terms. You are judging their culture in their standards and their terms. For instance, John Monaghan experienced ethnocentrism when he hesitated to eat bee larvae offered by the Mixtec community in Mexico. So, cultural relativism would ask us to understand this practice in its cultural context, as the Mixtec people view these larvae as a valuable food resource rich in protein. See, if someone is forcing you to eat or drink their thing, means that is ethnocentrism. So you need to understand others' feelings and beliefs also. You cannot force a vegetarian to eat non-vegetarian just because you are claiming that non-vegetarian have good protein. You cannot convince just because that it have more protein you have to eat. Their style, their beliefs are different. So you have to see from the perspective of their norms and practices. So that's what cultural relativism. When you're forcing them to eat, that's what ethnocentrism. Or you force the non-vegetarian to eat only vegetarianism. That is again ethnocentrism. Coming to ethnocentrism in real life, Or let's discuss about the previous slide itself. See, ethnocentrism can even appear in everyday life when we impose our own cultural standard on others. Do we really need to do that? Can you do that actually? No, you cannot, and it should not be done, right? See, a simple example is when we judge someone for eating with their hands in India as opposed to using cutlery, which may be the norm in the West. I still don't eat with cutlery or the spoons. In most of the time, I prefer to eat with hands, right? So if you, as a Western person, try to see this, it may not be similar to your culture, but this is what my culture. So you have to understand it from the perspective of my culture. If you force me to eat with cutlery, which I'm not comfortable with, that's what ethnocentrism. Similarly, if I force them to eat with their hands, that's what ethnocentrism. Let them eat in the style and the way they want. Let me eat in the style and the way I want. Let me eat meat and beef as I prefer to eat beef. I'm a Muslim and I don't mind in eating beef. Okay, it's not cow, beef. It's having good protein. But you may be a Hindu, you don't want to eat beef. Okay, so even Mahatma Gandhi also made a statement that see, I cannot recollect exactly on the same. I request my Muslim brothers not to eat cow, not beef. Beef include many things, guys. Don't get confused. When I say I eat beef, I mean buffalo, not cow. So Mahatma Gandhi made it very clear that I request my Muslim brothers not to eat cow. And still, even if they are doing it, I have nothing to do. I cannot kill them because human beings are more important than cow. Okay, so that's an entirely different discussion. So we were talking about this, right? A simple example that forcing, yes, okay. Now, anthropologists aim to avoid this bias by using cultural relativism to appreciate the diverse practices. So Franz Boas taught us that no culture is superior or inferior. Each has adapted to its environment in unique ways. Moving to next slide. Yeah, role of language. Very important. Language plays a crucial role in the transmission of culture, and it serves as the primary vehicle through which tradition, belief, and values are passed on from one generation to the next. So, language is very important. Through that only, the beliefs, tradition, culture, practices, norms, values, everything is passed on to the next generation. That's how it is maintaining the culture. For example, in the Naga tribes of India, the practice of head hunting was linked to the cultural identity, and stories of warriors actually were praised and passed down orally through generations. Okay, and this oral tradition reinforced the cultural value of bravery and provided younger generation with a sense of identity and belonging. So you might have heard that your grandmother, used to tell you story, but this generation, the chances of that is very less. But previous generation, at least, they had that luck to hear such kind of stories from their grandmother when they were sleeping. But this generation, they are not lucky to get such kind of story. Anyway, future it will not be there anymore. Okay, culture and social structure. So guys, in many more in when it comes to small scale societies, social structures are based on kinship system and small groups like bands or tribes. For example, bands such as the Inuit are egalitarian societies where everyone is equal, where decisions are made collectively and leadership is fluid. The nuclear family is the core social unit within the bands. And this structure helped them adapt to their environment, such as the harsh Arctic conditions. And the small flexible group size allows for mobility also, which is a key survival strategy in the Arctic. Mobility means movement. Okay. Now, moving on to the next one. Culture and adaptation. We discussed this already. Language transmission, culture and social structure. Culture as mechanism of adaptation. Okay, now coming to culture as mechanism of adaptation. Right, see, one of the most critical function of culture is the role in helping humans to adapt to their environment. Roy Rappaport in the study of Sambia tribe, he shows that the practice of pig slaughter, we discussed this already just before, that actually helps to regulate their food resources and agricultural stability and also social gathering and the bonding. And similarly, the Gonds of India practice shifting cultivation, which is an adaptive strategy in forested regions. So by burning vegetation and moving to new field, they prevent the soil depletion. So ensuring long-term sustainability for their community. See, there are certain sustainable practices that the culture do traditionally, but modern setup actually ruin everything. So these are cultural practices which are done to ensure that sustainability. Okay, now again, this is how the culture adapt to situation. Example. Now, culture as a dynamic system. So, in conclusion, this is what I want to discuss. Culture is very dynamic and complex system that shapes every aspect of human life, from the way we communicate to the values we hold. Okay, from everything, the culture is important, and it is both adaptive and maladaptive. In the beginning, it can be adaptive, and later it can be maladaptive. I've given a lot of examples for that. It can be stable and dynamic, and it continuously evolve as societies face new challenges. Okay. Now, what anthropologists do? Anthropologists aim to study culture holistically, appreciating both its tangible and intangible aspects, material and non-material aspect. And as we have seen through the examples of Yanomamo, Kwakwiti, and Sambia, if you remember, each culture has its own unique patterns. We have seen that and we have discussed that enough. So still, they all serve the same fundamental purpose. What is that? Helping the humans to survive and thrive in their environment. If you remember, all these are shaped and created and adapted for their environment. So guys, that's about this session. And now I'll take up the questions. Let me stop the recording and then we will be back to the Q&A.